Be seated. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. My wife, Thine, her father, his name was Roy Sieber. Roy, as some of you know, was I guess you could say world famous, expert in African tribal art. He was a curator at the Smithsonian Institution Museum of African and African American Art in Washington, D.C. for several years. He also would stand outside in the front yard talking for an hour and a half with the guy who came to trim the trees. And he was the judge of the children's game. Thine had two brothers and a sister, and they would play a game called Splatman. Now, Splatman is a takeoff of Batman, but in those days, Batman was not the grim, dark enforcer that he is in the movies nowadays. Batman was a series on TV played by Adam West, if you might remember, if you're really old. Yes, and the much to say about Batman, but never mind. The theme song of Batman was na 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 Batman, right? Some of us remember that. Yes. Okay, so this was Splatman, not Batman. Splatman, and what you did when you played Splatman is you got some modeling clay and you made for yourself a Splatman, a little human figure out of modeling clay. And then you would sing the song. You had to sing the song because that's part of the game. Okay? And you would sing the song, you go, na 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 Splatman, and you would throw your little Splatman up into the air as far as you could get it to go, and it would come crashing down out of the sky onto the earth and splat on the earth. And Dad, Roy Sieber, was the judge to see which Splatman was the splattiest. And the splattiest Splatman won the game. Yes. In other words, it doesn't matter how smart you are or world famous you might be in whatever field, don't take yourself too seriously, because otherwise you might miss out on the fun. Now, my grandmother on my mother's side was a rather austere and proper woman. For example, when my mother called her to tell her she was pregnant the first time with my older sister Becky, she said, "I'm Granny. I'm Granny. I want to be called Granny," she says. Okay, none of this Meemaw. Okay, none of this Gyamaw. We called my grandmother on my father's side Gyamaw because that was the best that Becky could manage at the age of 2, and it stuck until we were 21. And then when we were 21, my Gyamaw asked us to call her Grandma instead of Gyamaw, and Liz and I, my younger sister and I, did. We obeyed. We said Grandma instead of Gyamaw, but Becky kept on calling her Gyamaw and got away with it because she was her favorite. But that's a different story. Okay, Granny. So Granny. Now Granny, by the time I was old enough to remember anything, Granny had suffered some brain damage. And this was a devastating heartbreak to my mother. But every once in a while, the old Miriam, her name was Miriam, the old Miriam would come out. So that sometimes she was feeling well enough to come and join us for dinner. So her helpers would come and bring her in her wheelchair to the head of the table, and she would preside at the head of the table at this magnificent maple wood table with straight, high-back, ladder-back chairs made out of cherry wood, and we would sit there with the silverware and the china and the cloth napkins, and we would have a proper dinner. And when we were finished eating, us kids would say to my parents, we'd say, "Can we go?" And my parents would say, "Well, you have to ask Granny first." Well, so we would screw up our courage, and we would say to Granny, "May I be excused, please?" See, this was the necessary phrase. May I be excused, please? And you couldn't get somebody else to say it for you, like, may we be excused, and you run off like a bunch of hooligans. No, man, you had to say it yourself. May I be excused, please? And she would look at us with these fierce, blazing eyes, and she would say, you certainly may. It was like we had an electric jolt right up our spine, and not just because we were terrified of her, which we were, but rather because somehow or other she had conveyed to us that we were people of dignity. You are a person of dignity. Therefore, you will carry yourself in such a manner to reflect who you are. You are an important person. Therefore, what you do matters. And how you comport yourself in this world is significant because you are significant. This was her message. In other words, I think this was her way of saying to us that she loved us. Those who have gone before us into God's light are crazy, upside-down, hooting human beings who have lived their whole lives in a crazy, upside-down, hooting world. And yet, our second lesson for today, the book of Hebrews tells us that they are not gone. That yes, they're sinners just like we are, and all of their brokenness and sinfulness is washed away by God's mercy that comes to us in baptism. But they're not gone. Their hands are on our shoulders. The ways in which they taught us what love is, and what compassion is, and what integrity is, and what honor is, what trust means. Those gifts still burn bright in our soul. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. We need it in our crazy, upside-down, hooting world. Therefore, since we have been surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, those we know and those we don't, let us press forth into the race that is set before us with perseverance. It takes courage in our crazy world. It takes courage. And here is even some more good news. It's not just our ancestors of body and of spirit that hold us, but the very hands of God carry us forward. In the gospel lesson for today, Jesus shows up too late. He shows up too late. Mary and Martha and Lazarus, well, not Lazarus, Lazarus is too sick. Mary and Martha send Jesus a message saying, please, could you come quickly? Our brother Lazarus, whom you love, is ill. They want him to come and make things better. They want him to come and fix the problem. And Jesus shows up too late. And Martha, being Martha, you might remember Martha is the one who, according to medieval legend later on, subdued a dragon. This is Martha. Martha meets Jesus at the edge of town. She doesn't wait for him to come to her house. She meets Jesus at the end of town. She comes up to him and she says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Have you ever thought that? Lord, if you had been here, my sister would not have died. Lord, if you had been here, my wife or my husband would not have died. Lord, if you had been here, my child would not have died. Lord, if you had been here, this awful thing that happened in my life would not have happened. Lord, if you had been here, these awful things that we see happening in the world would not be happening. Lord, where are you now? Jesus says to her, your brother will rise. Your brother will rise. And she says to him, I believe that he will rise again at the resurrection on the last day, which In those days, many people, maybe most people, everyday people, believed in the resurrection. Not everybody, we'll talk about that next week, but most people did. I believe he will rise again at the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus says, I am the resurrection. I am. He echoes God speaking to Moses from the burning bush. When God is sending Moses on the most ridiculous, preposterous of errands, the most unrealistically hopeful of things to think about even doing. That is, he wants him to go to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the richest man in the world at the time, the king of the most powerful nation in the world at the time, and tell him to give up one of their primary assets, one of their most valuable commodities, the enslavement of the Hebrew people. It's a ridiculous proposal requiring a great deal of courage. And so Moses says to God, he says, well, when I go to the Hebrew people to tell them that you're coming to bring them out of slavery, they're going to want to know what your name is. And God says, my name is I am. I simply am. The God who brings people out of bondage of any kind. This is simply the way it is. Freedom is the foundation of reality. And God doesn't just bring us out of slavery and out of bondage just to do whatever we want. God brings us out of slavery into community, into the 10 Commandments, so that this balance, this dance, this interplay between freedom and community, this back and forth, this is simply the way it is and not chaos. I am. Jesus now says, I am the resurrection. The resurrection is a part of the way things are. At the beginning of the Gospel of John, Jesus is the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things were made through him. The resurrection. So that the resurrection is written. It's not just a nice idea or an essential doctrine of the church, which it is, but rather it is written into the foundation of being itself. It is woven into the fabric of reality. We think in our fear and in our mortality that death is the most powerful thing in the universe, and that those who wield the power of death have all the power, and it's not true. Life is the default setting of creation. I am the resurrection and the life, says Jesus. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet they will live. Do you believe this? Says Jesus to Martha. And she says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. That is the embodiment of God's presence who is coming into the world to save us. She says this, and the same phrase is repeated at the end of the Gospel of John in chapter 20, where it says, this book was written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. That's what John is trying to get across to us. That's who Jesus is. And Martha is the first one in the Gospel of John who comes out and says it, puts it into words. Now in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's Peter that comes out and says it and puts it into words. He says, Jesus, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. In the Gospel of John, it's Martha. Okay, so here's an aside. Sorry, guys, I can't resist this one. So we have all these popes that run their line all the way back to Peter. What would happen if we had all these popes that run their line all the way back to Martha? What if Martha was pope? It would be interesting. Anyway, do you believe? She says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Right here, slam in the middle of the Gospel of John, 11 chapters before, 11 chapters after, right here, slam in the middle of the chapter, in the middle of the Gospel. That's where she makes her testimony. Now, Jesus then goes to Lazarus' tomb. Lots happens in between there, but I'm already going to be going over, so we're not going to go into that. Get to the tomb, and Jesus says to Martha, open up that tomb. And Martha, being ever the practical one, says, but Lord, he's been dead for 4 days, he's going to stink. Jesus comes to our tombs that we make for ourselves, our tombs of addiction, our tombs of resentment, Our tombs of fear, our tombs of cowardice, our tombs of apathy, our tombs of not caring, and the tombs that are constructed around us, the tombs of trauma that have happened to us, the tombs of financial stress that comes upon us, the tombs of business troubles that seem intractable, the tombs. Jesus comes to our tombs and says, open up that tomb. And we'd rather not even look at the tomb. We'd rather not even know it exists. We don't even know it exists, but we know it stinks. So we said, Lord, it's going to stink. Yeah, like he doesn't know that. Smells it already. Open up that tomb. Martha is brave. Martha is brave. So she has the tomb opened. And Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb. And Lazarus is alive. That's the moment when the authorities of his day decide that they have to kill Jesus. There have been some mob moments before where people wanted to stone Jesus to death. But this is the moment when the religious and political authorities of his day decide, no, this guy has to die. We got to start thinking about this. Because now everyone is excited about Jesus. Everybody is willing to trust that there is life beyond death, that Jesus brings the life of God into this world. That's when they start to follow Jesus, and people think that he's going to wield the power of death, that he's going to cause a rebellion, and that the Romans, who are really, really, really good at wielding the power of death, are going to come and kill us all. So it is prudent. It is practical. It is sensible. It is the logical conclusion. It's obvious that Jesus has to die. Oh, and by the way, Lazarus had better die too, because he's a walking, talking example of the fact that God's life is beyond death, and that therefore those who wield the power of death are not in control. Now, under those circumstances, it would be perfectly understandable, perfectly logical, perfectly practical for Mary and Martha and Lazarus to distance themselves from Jesus. They're after him. We don't want to be that close to him. Maybe they might want to lay low for a while, keep a low profile, curl up in their hidey hole until everything blows over. And is that what they do? No, that's not what they do, because they have seen the glory of God. They've seen the resurrection. And so they have Jesus to dinner, which we've said before, a dinner is a public event. It's like reality TV nowadays. Everybody gathered around to watch who got to sit by who, and who said what to who, and who laughed at whose jokes, and all that was really important. And so it was a public event. And when you had somebody over to dinner, that meant you were on their side, part of their party, that you supported their cause. And they have Jesus to dinner. And Martha presides, and Mary anoints Jesus' feet. The hands of God are beneath us as we go through this crazy world. We need that because we need the courage of God. So we also have Jesus as our guest in our homes, in our congregation. We preside, as Martha did, at a feast where everyone is welcome. We have the hands of those who have gone before us in body and in spirit on our shoulders, and the hands of God beneath us upholding us. And therefore we are honored to wash and anoint Jesus's. Thanks be to God.